Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy, taking you back again to Scotland. Day two of our trip from 1999, March 27th. Because of the jet lag, Jeddah is 3 hours later than Edinburgh time. We were all up by about 5:30 a.m. with no breakfast service until 8. Jilreen went out for a jog and the kids and I watched cartoons. When Jilreen got back, I said I would try to find some kind of newsstand to buy the kids some snack food until breakfast was ready. Of course, I wasn't optimistic that I could find anything on a Saturday morning at a 6:30, but of course there was a little shop not 100 yards from the hotel that was open and had an apple and an orange and milk for the kids and a newspaper and ice cream for me. This country just seemed to work too well. Our goal this day was to see every square inch of Edinburgh. This necessitated getting an early start, but the Scots are a sleepy people and nothing got started until 9. Still, that didn't stop us from being the first ones in line at the bus station for the double-decker bus tour of the city. It was a beautiful sunny day, but also cold. We all had coats and hats and gloves on, but it didn't seem to help much against the biting Scottish wind on top of that stupid bus. Our initial plan was to do the complete bus circuit, and then once we had layover, a lay of the city, we would come back and do what looked most interesting. Well, after about 20 minutes of sitting in the freezing cold and listening to the blah, blah, blah of the tour guide, we decided the warmth of a tour of Holyrood Palace was a preferable strategy. Although the palace looked like it was named by a movie fan with some severe spelling problems, in reality, it was named by King David the Goofy, who was almost killed by a stag, that would be a deer in England, at that very spot. Because he was spared, how many people of any kind have you ever heard of that were killed by a deer? He decided to build an abbey on that precise spot. Royalty being what it wasn't long before they realized they kind of liked the convenience of the place, with its close proximity to the castle and its excellent deer hunting. And geez, aren't monks supposed to be cloistered away someplace out of town? So the king took it back, and so it remains the primary palace for the Duke of Edinburgh. That would have been Queen Elizabeth's husband. For those of you who will never go to Edinburgh, there are two significant things that I can remember about the place. One, Mary Queen of Scots' second marriage was to her cousin, a guy named Henry Stuart. I have Stuart blood in me, so this is significant. The Earl of Darnley. Anyway, this Darnley, hey, they called him Darnley. I never figured out this royal nomenclature. It would be like me being Dan Morris, Prince of Green Bay, and instead of calling me Dan or Morris or Prince, they called me Green Bay. Anyway, Darnley was jealous of Mary and her power, so he concocted a plan to kill her and her 8-month fetus. Darnley's henchmen stormed Mary's bedroom where David Riccio, who was her secretary, was playing the guitar for her and one of her friends. When the henchmen entered, their plan was to kill Riccio, which would so traumatize Mary that she would have a miscarriage and die from it. The plan, as most plans by my descendants, was grounded in some faulty reasoning. While the 57 stab wounds to Riccio did kill him, Mary managed to look away just in time and barely survived the death by shock attempt. Still, Mary figured a place where guitar players are so ruthlessly dealt with was no place for her to hang out in. So she raced over to the castle where she birthed her baby in the room that Jilreen and the kids saw the day before, which I missed while listening about the gate. The baby was James the First of England, or James the Fourth of Scotland, if you prefer, who was to go on to become the unifying king. Darnley only lasted a couple more years when his house was blown up with him in it. Somehow he survived the explosion only to be found strangled outside of the rubble. Under the Clinton administration, this would be known as natural causes. Mary spent 18 years in prison in London, guest of her cousin Elizabeth the First, and then decided to get her head chopped off. Royalty 500 years ago was the entertainment in lieu of soap operas. Number two thing that I learned in the main dining hall, there is a portrait gallery. This is significant because this is the place of Scotland and this is the dining hall. Holyrood is still used by the British royal family. Um, but this was the main dining hall in the palace. So in effect, this is one of the most significant rooms in all of Britannia. And the portraits, they were done by a local artist, and they were all of the King of Scotland from Canute through 500 years of Scottish history. The problem was that there were no historical descriptions or pictures of most of those kings. So this artist went down to the market and brought back two men and proceeded to paint something like 30 portraits. Man A with a beard, man A with a mustache, man A with a beard and mustache, man B in a suit of armor, man B with long flowing hair, man B in a dress. Yes, they also had depicted a couple of famous queens, but all of the portraits were thinly disguised portraits of the same couple of guys. It was a pretty fun joke, but also fairly pathetic when you think how long these have hung up on the walls of one of Scotland's most important places. By this point, we had walked around long enough that we were no longer cold, but our feet hurt. So we went out and caught the tour bus again and completed the city circuit. I had a strong recommendation of a little restaurant that was in the cellar next to the great cathedral. All we had to do was go around the city, the circuit, the bus circuit halfway again, and that was really our goal. But then we saw a pizza place in the market square underneath the castle and decided that it was too cold to go any further. About 5 minutes after ordering our food, we realized it was 12:55 and the great cannon was to be fired in just a couple of minutes. So Frankie and Alex and I went outside to wait. Frankie, remember, this is the 1 p.m. cannon. Frankie waited outside for 4.5 minutes when she got too cold to wait any longer, in spite of my pleadings. Alex and I waited in excited anticipation. It was only yesterday that we had heard the great story of the cannon announcing 1 p.m. throughout the city every day. Here we were almost directly below the cannon, sitting on the walls of the castle, sitting on the walls of the castle on the mountain above us. And we dreamed of a bygone era when cannons like this would have made a castle like this impossible to breach. Then it came 1 p.m. and like clockwork, we heard the mighty cannon go. Oh, it would have been inaudible if we had known it was coming. Oh well, some stories are better in the telling than in the hearing. After lunch, we walked to the Scottish Historical Museum and spent exactly 1.5 hours there. We spent exactly 1.5 hours there because that was all the time we'd slotted in to see the museum. Since time was tight, we broke up into teams so that we could cover more ground, and we raced around to try to see every artifact in 5,000 years of Scottish history, covering 4 stories in this massive building. The kids spent most of the time in the room of torture. They had a kind of tribute to the medieval pain infliction, including working guillotines and thumb screws. We had to leave at 3 because we knew the shops closed at 5 and we had to buy things too. Unfortunately, the shopping street was way across town on the other side of the castle. But fortunately, the shopping street was not too far away from the Hard Rock Cafe, and so I knew a shortcut. By the time we reached the bookstore, our feet were bloody stubs. It reduced us to shopping from our knees. But this bookstore was an incredible 5-story thing, and shopping from our knees didn't prevent us from buying 100 pounds worth of books. And I mean the weight, not the value. Of course, our forethought wasn't so good. I mean, what were we going to do with 100 pounds worth of books until the end of the day? But that's what dads are for, I guess. At this point, it was almost exactly 5, and we had decided that we all wanted to go on the Edinburgh Ghost Tour. Problem was it didn't start until 8. So since the bus service didn't stop until 6, I insisted that we make a pilgrimage to the graveyard of the single greatest Scot, Adam Smith. The kids didn't mind since we would get to rest our bloody stumps on the bus, but they hadn't calculated the cold or the fact that the bus ride was only 15 minutes. By around 5:45, we found the graveyard. The sun was beginning to set, it was getting dark and considerably colder. and then the search began. You know, if it were me, I would have charged $3 to get in, and then I would have put up a huge sign, "This way to Adam Smith's grave." But I guess though he was the founder of capitalism, his ideas still haven't fully soaked into the Scottish people. We wandered and wandered and wandered around this relatively small cemetery, figuring Smith's tomb had to be big, it had to be prominent, had to be old. There was only one other person in the cemetery with us, and he cheerfully had never heard of Adam Smith and hadn't seen his grave. As the feet got sorer, not to mention the back with the 100 pounds of books, and the city got darker and the body colder, I felt it a panic. I mean, I had to find this grave. Then we bumped into a middle-aged, distinguished-looking black man who was also looking for Adam Smith's grave. So as a team, with the kids racing around trying to help us, we crossed and recrossed the graveyard. At last, the other man called us over. He had found it. It was old, it was big, and it was obscurely hiding in a dark corner of the cemetery. We took a picture for the man of himself in front of the gravesite, and then Jill Reed took one of me in front of it. And then, quite dark, quite cold, and quite tired, we realized that the cemetery was at the bottom of a huge hill, right next to Holyrood, by the way. And we had to walk all the way up the Royal Mile to get to where the ghost tour started. As we trudged up the hill, we passed restaurant after interesting restaurant that all closed at 6 p.m. The only place we saw to eat were either elegant or pubs. At last, near the top of the hill, we found a pancake house. You may be wondering, as much as I was, what a 24-hour-a-day pancake house was doing at the top of Castle Hill at the luxurious end of the Royal Mile. I mean, this real estate must be worth a fortune. So putting two and two together, I figured this must be about the greatest pancake house on the planet. And given that it had the added advantage of A, being open, and B, not having a formal dress code, and C, allowing minors to enter, we decided to enter. Well, it was sticky enough to be a great pancake house. As you walk in, you stuck to the floor. As we sat down at the dirty tables, you instantly stuck to the chair and the table. The table was so bad, and the service not existed, that I had to go find a cloth to wipe off the table. Of course, the cloth was sticky. Finally, we had the place reasonably ordered when the waitress brought us a great sticky menu. Alex and I ordered grand, putrid pancake house hamburgers. Jilreen ordered a great, limp pancake house salad, and Frankie, well, she ordered some pretty damn good pancakes. By the time the food came, the waitress having had to take zombie steps crossing the sticky floor, it was almost time to go to the ghost tour. So we wolfed out our food, stuck the money to the table, and raced outside into the frigid night air. I had this thing pegged as a disaster right from the beginning. We were all cold, all beyond exhausted, all sleepy. Jenna time, it was starting at 11 p.m., and all sick to our stomach, except for Frankie, of course, who had made the only rational food decision in a pancake house. Now, carrying 100 pounds of books, we set off on a 2-hour walking tour of scary places in the city. Of course, it's likely to be the only thing the kids will ever remember of Edinburgh. I mean, it was goofy. A young woman dressed up like a witch and talking over dramatically was our leader. She would whisper a story so that everyone would get in close. And then when a dramatic part would come, she would shout it out loud. The kids thought this quite hilarious and scary and fun. The stories were all gruesome, tales of black death, murders, hauntings, and the like, which the kids thought all quite terrifying, gripping, and relaxing. Relaxing, of course, because they couldn't be expected to stand at this point of the day, so they took turns sitting on Dad's shoulders as my legs wobbled under the weight of the 100 pounds of books and the dead weight of a tired child. Then we descended to the city catacombs, ancient, lost until a few years ago, underground storage area. They really didn't have much to do with the city or scary things, mostly just places to put the whiskey. But they were damp, cold, hell, everything was cold, dark, and they echoed. They made a marvelous backdrop for the witch lady to tell her ghost stories. By the end of the tour, Jilreen and the children had not much more than the living dead, cold, tired, sore, sleepy, nauseous. I suggested we walk the 5 miles back to our hotel and only changed my mind when I felt the cold steel of the revolver pressed against my temple. We promptly found a cab, drove the 10 minutes back to our hotel, and we were asleep before our heads hit the pillow. By midnight, we had visitors into our bed who had bad dreams about ghosts. Okay, that's the story for today, guys. Hope you can come again tomorrow, and we'll talk to you then.